So, after narrowing down the purpose and cause I wanted to pursue, identifying and researching all of the issues and information regarding those issues, I now had to not act prematurely in generating my own solutions, but follow the advice laid out in my first chapter by seeking to work in solidarity with the people. Thus, before looking at ways to assist with the issues, I now had to seek out experts' advice and knowledge in the field and gain for myself my own field experience with the people being affected, these children and their families. Thus, the title for this chapter is The Scarred Faces of War. Some of these families and children, and even the experts, had many scars left behind from either apartheid, child abuse, or various other children's issues. By going to the experts in the field, I would avoid being paternalistic and arrogant towards others. I would instead be fostering a sense of Ubuntu, which is Swahili for I am we. The experts I sought out in South Africa identified the real causes or contributors to the issues facing children in South Africa and Africa on the whole. They then provided some ways to alleviate, if not combat, these issues.
Because my logic is this, in order to develop people, they must have had a basis of education. Now if they're not even getting that basis of education, that's long before the child ever gets abandoned. It goes back to when they were still getting their education about, what are their plans for the future. So it becomes like a spiral just spiraling out of control that ends up in them having 8 to 10 children that they never planned, right. And they can't afford those children, or they get themselves into situations where they contract HIV/AIDS, and then they're ill and they can't afford the medical help, and then it just becomes such a situation that they just, okay, now I can't take care of my kids. Take it. And the prevalence is so high that one thinks it's not just a few people. It's communities. I mean, why would we have so many kids who are abandoned and abused and neglected if it was just a section of people? But it's just communities upon communities upon communities. So yeah.
Also, looking at the issue of education, a large number of young people that I've seen around do not have the grade that requires them to be employed or further their education. For instance, most of them do not have grade 12, which is important, or should I say rather imperative, that we get young people opportunities, or education becomes much cheaper for them to get, so that they can be motivated to go to school and get education.
I think a lot of the good cultures and the good practices have kind of fallen by the wayside. I think with urbanization, a lot of where the child belonged to the whole village, and there was no such thing as an orphan in the old African culture. The neighbour or the auntie or somebody that would become the mother for the child if the mother died. That has totally gone. I mean, a few years ago it would have been unheard of to have children's homes full of black children, and now that's the majority of children coming into care, the majority of children being abandoned. And I think urbanization has a lot to do with that. It's broken down a lot of those good cultures and good traditions.
Every motive, every action has its own motive. Maybe that's why we have motive action, which we call motivation. Because a 15-year-old girl raped badly, and that rape resulted into a pregnancy, and then that 15-year-old girl decides to keep the baby. That baby is not a baby into that 15-year-old. That baby is a scar. So what happened most of the time is that these parents then punish the kids for what has happened to them. It's more of a psychological issue more than an emotional issue, because every time they look at the child, they think of what has happened, how about you, know. Now the innocent child then goes through those problems unconsciously and unknowingly, unaware. You know what I mean? So I think what happens is that, you know, it's a question of children, you know, getting the things that they don't know about. In the case where a parent abused their child, you know what I mean? And then in the case where a child abused another child, again, it's a question of the background where that abusing child comes from.
Right.
Because if the mother and the father always fight, that interfere or affect the being of the young person. The anger, the frustration, then the child take it back into their peers. And then you find a child very much abused, aggressive, hitting, biting, stabbing and all of that. It is because of the background where the child comes from.
Well, I think it's poverty. Then poverty leads to everything like robbing and stealing just to eat. Yeah, and teenage pregnancy, like teenagers having sex, HIV and AIDS, and lack of education. Yeah.
Which make these young people, the small kids, you know, to look at negative role modeling in the community now. Because if a guy that is driving an S50 or S-Class Mercedes-Benz, drop top, fancy, pimped up ride, they want to be like that person, but not knowing that that person is actually a drug dealer. Or that person might be, you know, involved in corruption. But because what these young people see, they want to become that.